Hello there, welcome to Working on a Dime. It is a lovely blue sky Saturday out there today, and I'm in here making resin dice with you. So this is my messy desk. Yeah, I'm Brian. I run Dungeons on a Dime. I use he, him pronouns. And this is just a nice little live show where you guys get to see me working from home, and sometimes working with other artists as well. So today I'm working solo. I'm going to be making dice for my Kickstarter. You can see that I've got a camera set up so you can see my gorgeous, immaculate nail-bitten hands, and just how I go about doing stuff. So to start, safety first, kids. Get my apron. Because I'm going to be working with resin today, and resin is sticky and sometimes caustic, and some resins, if you expose them to your skin too often, if your skin comes into contact with the resin too often, you can actually develop a severe allergy to it. You don't always start with an allergy to resin, but it can build up. So, safety first. So today, we're going to be starting with dice. So these are some actual filled, cured molds, or silicone molds with the resin cured and everything inside. So this is what the finished thing will look like. I made this earlier for you. And how I made them was, I have a master, which I don't actually have on hand, which is what has made these molds. I have taken silicone rubber, poured it around a mold, a master, which looks just like this, let it cure, and then I pour resin in, and then ta-da, you get a replicant. So this is one of the dice for my Kickstarter. You can see that it has some imperfections that I'll be sanding out when I've finished all of them in one big job. As you can see, it's got a little flex that I'm scraping off. It also has what's called a sprue here as well, which I'll be taking off with a saw, and then I'll be sanding that side flat. You can see here that it's sort of like a ruby that just is really cool, and it will catch the light and look fantastic. It's a little bit dark near my desk right now, so it's not looking as gorgeous and shiny as it could, but it's a diamond in the rough, quite literally, or a ruby in the rough. This is the silicone mold, so without that resin in there, it's actually squishy now. And you can see when I open it up that it has the indentations on the inside that the dice will be molded with. So you see those indentations go in, then when I pour the resin in and it hardens, you get the indentations on the dice. Looks really cool, so you get the runes. Now, I have 3 molds, and what I'm just going to be doing today is making enough resin to fill all of them, and talking about issues I've had along the way, the process, that sort of stuff. But with these molds, I can reliably, or hopefully reliably, get good molds. However, I have an issue with this one. I have not mixed the resin quite well enough. I can tell because even with a few days curing, it's sticky and tacky and weak on some sides. You can see that actually with this dice, I'm pushing and it's coming off. So that's not good. So that's not a cured die, that wasn't mixed correctly. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit lazy when I was making this dice, so I will make these on stream very good, but you can see here that this dice is fine. Just pressing my nail in them to check they're hard. They should be really hard and leaving no marks. No, they are all good. And if you guys have any questions, or just want to chat, there is a little chat to the right of the screen as well, so you can say hi or do whatever you want. But yes, these are the dice. They will make dice clacky sounds. And yeah, this is my bad dice. I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to put these in my finished pile, which is just back over here. So I've got maybe 10, 20 dice now that I've been slowly contributing to. And I'll do one big finishing polish vibe at the end when I'm done. So yeah, we'll start by, well, cleaning my hands with that bit of resin, and then I'll be putting on gloves and pouring out a fresh batch. So back in just a sec. So the first thing I'm putting out is just a clear resin, oh not resin, but silicone matte. Silicone and resin don't combine, so they can peel off one another. You can see there are little globs of resin on the outside of this silicone mold, and they just peel straight off. This cured resin is totally safe to handle. It's what all dice are made from. It's just the separate components can be a little difficult. So right now I am putting on nitrile gloves. These are thick rubber gloves. Not thick, fairly thick. Not as thick as marigolds you'd use for washing up, but thick enough and, more importantly, non-reactive to the resin that when I put them on, I do not get gunk coming through the gloves. These are the two big things of resin that I have, part A and part B. When mixed together, they will make the mixture. This part A here is the hardener, I think it is, and the part B, no, got it around. Part B is the hardener, part A is the actual resin thick material. So you can see that this flows very slowly. This flows very quickly. So the hardener is the chemical that's turning the resin into the hard material that it is. You want to mix, at least with these resins, details are in the description of what they are, 1-to-1. So you don't have to worry about having weighing or scales or anything like that, as long as you've got the right sizes. That should be good. I'm mixing 250 milliliters of resin today, because it's about 70-80 milliliters for each mold, and then a little bit extra for the pot because it will stick to the sides. But I've just measured those and marked those out on my jug, and that'll be all fine. So first step to making the dice is I take the hardener and I pull out 125 milliliters of that, or however much hardener I'm using, and then I add the colour to it and mix that in so it's nice and smooth. Make sure that when you are working with resin that you use the right safety measures at the time. So for example, I've got an apron on, I've got gloves on. This is non-toxic fume, so it's safe to breathe, not that I'm going to be huffing this stuff. I have a window open as well for fresh air, also because it's a nice day. But make sure that you have the correct safety precautions. Some resins require you to have masks and all that sort of stuff. I read up on this resin and it's safe at air temperature. But I've poured in my resin, and I'm going to take some alcohol dyes, which aren't reactive but get suspended in the mixture. I'm going to pour in a couple drops of each. So the main base is this Alumilite red, which I use, and then I darken the mix with some browns and some oranges. You can use any colours you like. You can put glitters and all sorts of fun things in here. I've seen people even put there are some fantastic dice making forums out there, but I've seen some people make, say, they put like, when their tarantulas shed their skins, they put the old casks in there, they put hair, they put gems, and even little glass spheres with like a swirling mica in there, just to make it all cool. But this is the very first step. I just swirl everything up, and I get the colour looking nice and good in there. The reason why I'm doing it with the hardener, if I move this back a sec, you'll see it's a nicer red. The reason why I'm doing this with the hardener is that it is much more fluid and doesn't trap as many air bubbles, so I can really stir it and make sure that it's thoroughly all the way through. I'll explain in a little bit why I'm worried about air bubbles when I'm pouring it in, and when I'm mixing in the Part A resin. This is the Part B hardener. And let me know if the music is too loud. The music is just the like lo-fi hip-hop radio, which is all copyright-free music. And that's just in the background. And if my voice needs to be louder or quieter, or if you just want me to shut up, really. That's all mixed in. If I lift this up, you probably see there are lots of air bubbles in there. That's not great, but there's an easy solution to that in a second. And actually, I'm going to get that going. I'm going to boil a kettle and I'll show you what I do. But I'm going to let that boil while I work. Right, bowl and water. Mystery. Explain what I'm doing in a sec. But now I'm going to measure out the correct amount of resin. I'm just using a spatula to mix everything because it's nice and neat. So I'm going to turn this around, see what I'm marking for 250, and slowly and steadily just pour all this in. So I'm just mixing 1 to 1. Very easy maths for someone who is dumb like myself and can't do math. Now, I want to make sure this is evenly mixed all the way through. So I'm actively stirring it. You can see that it's 2 different thicknesses, so it's very gloopy. And this is where the boiled kettle is going to come in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to suspend this in a bain-marie, fancy word, like you're melting chocolate, in some hot water, not boiling, which is why I've got the cold water there as well, but just some warm water to warm this up so it's a little more fluid, so that all these air bubbles that you can see are happening here easily rise to the surface and, you know, pop, so to speak. I'm just giving it a good stir first, scraping the sides as well, making sure that everything is really mixed in there, because last time I didn't do that, and that led to this slightly sticky, tacky texture. If I put this in, you can see that there's sort of like this tackiness as it kind of gets the light and softness. That's not cured, and there's no way I can fix that, unfortunately. But you live and you learn. This is my first time making dice, or well, my 10th time making dice, because I have about 30 of them now, and all the tests I did before. But I'm trying out new methods to make it more efficient every time. So I have that boiling water, kettle, cold water, bowl, so I want it steaming. Just put a finger in there. Yeah, hot enough that I can put my finger in, but not too hot. So that I can then put the bowl in there, and then just very slowly stir it and let it warm up. By doing this, you'll notice there'll be a change in the texture. And it'll become more silky and smooth. And that means that as it heats up, the mixture becomes not thinner, but easier for the air to pass through, and any air bubbles will just move to the top and pop. Now, the reason the air bubble popping and not having the air bubbles is important is because when you pour it into the molds, any air bubbles may come through in the final mold, but they'll also take up space in the mold. So if the bubbles don't pop as it cures, you'll get actual, like, capsules of air in your dice, and that will not look good. There'll be imperfections, and it'll also make the dice weaker, or any kind of resin mold that you're making weaker. But it'll also take up space, which means that if they do pop while it's setting, then that extra space that you're using, say the sprue here, that might sink down. And if that sinks down enough, there's enough air bubbles that this is all used up, then you'll actually get a cavity where it doesn't fully cure. And I think I have one that has had that happen. Well, I had one lying about, but it's gone walkies, I guess. But yes, you get cavities and they're not great. You can see here the texture is much smoother as I'm working it. You can even see the air bubbles are much smaller, especially say up like here. So if I keep stirring it, it'll get very, very small, which means, you know, they're not as a big impact, which is why you have the sprue in the first place, so that when you're pouring it in, yeah. You guys are smart, you get it. Now the cure time on this resin is anywhere from half an hour to an hour before it starts to solidify. So I'm going to stir it for about 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Now you can see here, or I can see that there are some small air bubbles. But these will pop when I put it into my pressure chamber, which basically just compresses the air around the mold. These small air bubbles are not nearly as big a problem as the big air bubbles. You can see here. And as I'm pouring it, some of them will pop naturally as they're exposed. So if I like smear it like this, you can see that some of the air bubbles have already popped just by being exposed and moved. Fantastic, so that is good. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this out. I'm going to get some paper towel to dry off as well. Paper towel is always handy to have about when you're doing any kind of craft project. So here we go, just a bit of paper towel. And I'll keep this by if I need to wipe up any spillages of silicone as well. But I'm working in a nice, clean space. The desk is dirty from like a couple years of use and things being spilled in the inks, that sort of stuff. But it's clean. I'm gonna move my seat over. Now, this is all ready to go. I need to pour it in the next, 10-15 minutes. But this is my mold. And the way that I make sure the mold stays the same shape, I give a good, keen look at it to make sure that it's not misaligned. This is a really bad example of that, really. But I just make sure by lifting it out, letting it naturally sit back, and then checking, making sure, hey, yep, this looks good. And then I grab a rubber band, and I put it around. Now the silicone mold itself is actually very thick. So I've actually carved little notches into the sides that the rubber bands can fit into, so that it holds nice and easy, so when I move it about, it doesn't shift. I always just like to make sure they're nice and neat. I just have like a bag of cheap, £2 rubber bands. Some people like to use tape. I found that tape just doesn't stick well enough for me, but it works for other people. It's all about the technique that you like doing, really. All the tutorials that I have followed have been from a YouTuber called Ribinator, which I find quite funny because all the way through school I called myself Byronator online, so I guess the whole Terminator analogy is easy and popular. If his name is actually Brian in real life, then that's twice as funny. Maybe it's Ryan, who knows. But yes, so I make sure that everything is nice and fitting. I'm not using rubber bands that are super strong because I don't want it to compress the mold and squeeze it in like this. Again, it's an extreme example, but if it does, it can make the dice bowed, concave on its flat face here, so it's not smooth, which means when I go to sand it, it won't have a good clean finish. So they're not strong, they're just holding it together gently. But it means that it won't, like, when I pick it up. Even then I do want to be gentle with it. But yeah, so I'm going to get the rubber band in, make sure it's all nice and smooth. Perfect. And I'm just going to... you can see here a lot of the air bubbles are moving to the top. Very gently going to stir this. But just by virtue of being warmer, they're going to be much easier to pour. So, I'm going to move these molds to the side. Move this cat out of the way as well. Boiling water. Never quite fun just to have about in case you knock it over. Move my other camera as well, because you can see my pretty face. And first things first, I'm going to get this out of the way. Oh, my camera has turned off. Apparently just mirroring my iPad. Ooh, Lord, everything's fallen over. Right. Okay. You want to stay there because you are a good camera, don't you? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Ta-da, no hands. There we go. So, you see already some of it is sticking. So this is a good time, now that it is still fluid, to pour into the mold. Now I have cut, just with a scalpel, an entry hole. So the way that this worked, if you look at the die, is that I had a little bit of an extra bit sticking off to the die when I was making the mold, but the rest of this like area here is actually this cut mark. It's sticky. And the reason why I've got this cut mark is so it makes it easier to pour. So I pour slowly and steadily into the mold. And because it's warm, it flows in easily. I've made sure that this entry point, this sprue, is nice and wide so that when I'm pouring, air can escape from the dice very easily. And I'm going to hold this up so you can see. It's going in one side, and the air is coming out the other. I also want to pour slow and steady. If I pour too fast, it'll totally cover the hole up, and that'll mess up the dice. It means that the air can't escape easily, and that can cause more air bubbles as you're pouring in. Now my dice are quite large, so you can do it like this. You can still do large sprues with smaller dice, but you just have to be careful you're not affecting the actual quality of the dice you're casting itself. This part is just slow and steady. You can see here that it's full now. And what I'll do is I'll pour some extra resin, and I'll very gently squeeze the mold to make sure there's no air bubbles in there. You can see one came out. And then I'll set this aside just to rest. This one is a little skew, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to prop it up on this dice here, just to keep it horizontal. It doesn't affect the actual casting of the die, but it stops the excess from leaking over. And then once I know that all the air bubbles have come out of it, I will scrape off any excess. So again, got a nice carved in divot there. I'm going to take the resin, I'm going to pour it. And you can see that resin is sticking to the side of the jug here, just like if you're making cake, get cake mix on the side of the bowl. So I have made up about maybe 10 milliliters of extra resin for each dice, just to make sure that there's always spare. Making dice is a lot like making sourdough bread, if you are doing any of that COVID challenge. And what that means is it's a little bit of energy over a long period of time. It takes, you know, it's very quick to make up some resin and then put it into molds and then put it into a pressure pot, but then you have to leave it for 6 hours, and then, you know, then it's cured, you take it out, then it's got to cure longer, and then you've got to, you know, sand it, polish it, make it look really good. And that can take time. But each individual step does not itself take a lot of time. There we go, so that is another mold. Give it a very gentle squeeze. I'm not like doing this, I'm doing like very, very slight motion. Just to encourage if there are any air bubbles that are big, that want to rise, to give them that slight push movement to get them to go up. That one looks fine. Moving on to the third mold. This probably got the biggest divot. We do like a thick divot. Burgeoning is a word I could use for that. And again, I am just pouring in slow and steady. There are people who use pipettes, but I feel that's extremely wasteful. Just warming up your resin. And you can see here that it's warm, but it's not hot. It's not at all. This is maybe like 15 degrees, 20 degrees, it's tepid. So you can see here, air bubble coming out at the top there. And this gentle squeezing helps the air bubble come out, and then you slowly release to help it suck the resin back in. If you do it really quickly, then you can just suck air back in through the little channel that it's made, if it's a really big air bubble. So what you want to do is just a gentle squeeze, gentle release, gentle squeeze, gentle release. With this, in some very good pours. This is an example of letting it sit for a little bit. You can see that there's a little foam of air bubbles. These are all air bubbles that have lifted out because it's been warm silicone. But this is excess, this is really not needed. What I'll do is I'm gonna take, this one's really quite overflown. These two have not. So I'm just gonna take my palette knife, very quickly, firm and quick. That did not work. Normally, it's very graceful. That was not at all graceful, Brian. It's because I'm streaming it. And just taking off any excess. And because that is now leaving it not quite enough, I'm just going to top it back up again. But you can see here that it is flowing much slower now. It's cooling down. It's also getting to the point where it will start to cure. But yes, paper towel, and a little bit extra, just to clean up that side, and then I'm going to put them into my pressure pot. So I'll show you the pressure pot first, and then I'll put them in. But I'll go on break for just a minute or two to let the air filter, the air compressor, fill it up. It's very loud, so, well, not very loud, but it's loud enough that it'd be really boring, and yeah. So these go in the bin, and then I will show you the compressor. So for this, I'm going to take my gloves off. Do them inside out like this, just from the edge, making sure that I'm not touching any of the uncured, unmixed resin. Bare hands. What I'll do is I'm going to take this off of its stand. It moves. You can see my very messy flat. So this is the air compressor. I'm a bit further away from my mic, but it's really very simple. It's just pretty much a paint pot with a air gauge on, and this is the compressor itself. It's called a baby elephant because it looks like a baby elephant. This is where the dice will be going. But to compress the air, it just has to pump it in. If you've ever had an inflatable mattress or filled up your car tires, you know that it's loud. It's about 50 decibels, so it's not going to be a disruption to the other people or the flats, but it is loud. So for now, I'm just going to put the stream on break for about 5 minutes while I put these into the pressure pot. See you in a little bit. Just realised I had my mic on mute the whole time. I'm having some issues with my iPad, which is not fun. And I will be back in 5 minutes while I figure out what's going on. Hello, welcome back. This is Working on a Dime with Brian Tyrrell, who has managed to fix his iPad so that it isn't broken anymore, and you can see pretty art now, which is great. And you can hear me, which is also great. And you can hear some very chill music, which is triple great. This is my iPad. It draws in real time now, which is fab, by the way. Just saying, count your blessings. But yeah, this is the menagerie I'm going to be working on. Yeah, so you can see here, I can make a new layer, and then I can go black, and I can go menagerie. So we're going to have some birds here. They can fly in and out of this sort of open glass window space. We have a pigeon coop tower for birds that are recovering, a main hall for, you know, surgeries take place in and people stay in. There's sort of like an animal care back here, maybe like the dogs and cats are kept here. There's a greenhouse for medicinal plants, and there are some stables around the back that go out towards a field for your four-legged friends to run about in. And there's also a little shed and garden around the front of the tower here, and it's all on a slope going down a hill. Gonna remove those notes and oh, that's the wrong one. Have a little jiggy-roo. Oh, what's going on here? Just check out what these layers doing. Those were the notes I made. That was the slope of the hill. I'm going to keep those in for me. That's the original sketch. So you see, like, this is the idea I had, and then this is me kind of figuring out better perspective for it. And now I'm going to go back over it in today's little draw along for an hour and make some more details. Gonna rotate my iPad. Let me see what will happen if I rotate the iPad like this. Aha, so it makes it interesting. Well, what I can do is this. So you can see the whole screen, and I can make my face bigger because I'm vain. Super vain. Oh, that just made it disappear. Opposite vanity. Yay! It's me! You can see me looking at my screen the whole time. It'll be fun. But yes, I'm just gonna start sketching some details. Because that's how I work. I tend to do layers and layers and layers and layers of details. So I'm thinking, I do love exposed beam, but actually I do that a lot. And this is more like a medical facility. So instead I'm going to be doing like a brick sort of outlay. So it's going to have some nice blocky chunky stone bricks to begin with. This is going to be cobble, I think. This is much too thick a brush to be using. I'm going to lower the camera a little bit as well. Ooh, my hand. Ta-da! So you can see my face more. Yes, so I think this is going to be probably cobblestone. So at this point, I'm just kind of sketching the rough, like, vibe I want. And not really worrying too much about looks and stuff like that. So because this is all sort of like a supporting layer, what's it called, foundation of the building, and the shed is part of that supporting layer, I'm gonna be having it all be cobblestone. Maybe there's a little window here in the cobblestone. Could be cute. This sort of shed is going to be built into it, so this is going to be some timber here for the roof. And there'll be some tiles coming down. Now we've got the curve of the tower coming into the shed, which I really liked. Sort of that sort of hodgepodge put together feel. So I'm going to try and keep that in the design. Excuse you. I'm always very lazy with tiles. I think I've drawn like too many of them and now I'm a bit sick of it. These will just be little placeholders for now. I'll make them nicer and even and pretty and stuff later. Now I'm just doing some cute lines. And then maybe there'll be like some cracks, maybe there'll be some moss growing on them. Like an, ooh, I like the idea of having like some vines. Sort of like some vines creeping up the building, going around the corner, over this kind of corner of the house. Shed, even. And then having leaves. Sort of taking out, covering this part. Little shoots and creepers. Now, that's where the entrance is, so I'm gonna rub that out. Excuse you. And figure out the stairs that we're gonna go here. Because we have like a side entrance here into the pigeon coop tower that I'm not ignoring, I'm just not doing right now, because I'm lazy. But I'm gonna leave that there not to forget it. I don't know if you can hear it, but there was a guy, my neighbour, I think downstairs, or maybe like that way, that wall. He's playing banjo. He's been playing banjo for, I'm gonna say like the whole of lockdown, so about 2 months now. And I don't know if it's like an electric banjo, but it sounds like he's just plucking the strings at random and he does it for like 8 hours a day. Which is a lot, let me tell you. Right, so where's the stairs? We're going to put the stairs in the middle of the thing. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so we're going to put it here. And the thing is, these stairs, the ground is like this sort of slope. So the stairs come out there and out here. And then maybe they've got like a curve to them. There's obviously going to be more steps on the more downside of this. I'm going to grey this a little bit. Am I? Yes. And figure that out. So that's like... Hang on, no. I'm going to go back to the old layer because I need this structure in my head. So the curve of the circle is there. I've done something wrong. That should be like that. Yep. There we go. So there's that sort of plane, and then there's like that. Yeah, cool. I'm figuring it out. I'll redo it. So, new way of thinking about it. Entrance is here. We'll say it's like a big, like, double door. And like that's where it is. And, yeah. I'm gonna turn on the assist. And do it that way. So this is the actual entrance platform. This is how far the stairs go out. Yes, like let's say that's the actual platform itself. So, like that. Ooh, not assisted. Okay. Cool. Hopefully, those should assist me. Yeah. That sort of point, so like... this is a steep hill, Brian. Steep. Yeah. Let's just experiment. Because like that would go out to here. That goes out to here. Excuse you. To there. Pen, please. Please behave. I am drawing, and I like the fact that you like me drawing. And then that's the ground level. So do another step, and then we show that it's sort of... Right? Right. That works. Yeah. Stairs on a slope. So now I'll do those prettier that make more sense, that are more equidistant. Cool. awful lot. That's not guided. There we go. Right? No. That looks dumb. I'm gonna be honest. Like, it's a lot of steps to get into a building. I don't think that would work. Let's have a ramp instead. Ooh, interesting. Brian's not basing this on reality. That's why it looks weird. Cool. Rub this out. cube. So it's sort of like this kind of curved structure. Doing the layer. It's this sort of curved, like, entrance with a much tighter, steeper curve there, so it's more like this. Which is interesting, and because it's perspective, we can shift it out like this, and then add just a little flat bit there for people to rest out on the doorstop, so they don't just like fall. And then we can draw this down, and we have this sort of curve here. Those would be some very steep steps. We could put steps there, like if we... Because essentially, I'm understanding the space right, they end at the same place, but like... This is like that. But the shape... The angle is very steep. Come on. Sometimes Procreate, I think it's a new issue, like it's come in very recently, but sometimes the program gets stuck on drawing a shape. Yeah. Those are some steep, shallow stairs. That is a no thanks. Got to be like this. Okay. Instead, why don't we... That's a bit. And this is an animal sanctuary, so why don't we have a water cistern? That'd be a nice feature. Sort of like this is coming around to protect it. And some like shallow basin. a maybe like a dog head. Water. It wouldn't be an animal head because animals don't like looking at other animals. But yeah. And then animals come along and drink, and then can be easily guided upstairs inside for surgery, and it's wide enough to say for horses, for bears, but also dogs and cats and other things can be carried in. Big stretch. Big stretch. But yeah, going upstairs. We love the doormat. And what's safe now is the doors are like double doors, so we'll figure out those details as we draw. Now let's look. That's pretty equal. Square there. Yeah. That's central. Doesn't quite look central, but it's good enough. What we do now is we'll go down to this layer, which is our little draft, and just rub out those details. So that I can close them down. And again, these are just very quick notes to myself as to how I want to lay the sort of space out. I'll worry about colour, shading, details, all that after. So I'm seeing right that this is getting confusing. So instead I will just very loosely draw outline of the lines again and say lines. Myself into the bush. To show this is going out into this space, and then there'll be like some looser stones set in the ground, sort of stuff, maybe some. It's a slight lift, but it does have a cut-off point. Because it's also raising with the slope of the soil. Right, so these stairs are very straightforward, because essentially the earth is like this. That's like a curve. Hang on. Good time to put in myself another perspective guide layer. It's just a slight curve. Slightly slant. So the earth is lower. Put that to an angle. So it needs to happen with those stairs. Is that we show that on the other side. So we have steps going up, and we've got the last little step here at the end. It's sort of flat, but then has a bit of depth, so it is the last step of this into the garden. This is supported, but it's like a little see thing over here. Let's make it look clear for me. We've got a little stupid bit. I'm just going to take this layer and reach it a little bit, because the perspective will all remain the same, because it's isometric. Okay. Well, yes, I am. Yeah, so the little strip. It'll be easy if I just do this. And there we go. Now I had this sort of doorway archway that kind of shared the stairwell, and I like the idea of that being sort of like cobbled building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this portion of the stairs, or at least just smooth it. I'm going to do that because essentially there's a door here. Instead, I'm going to make this bit flat. I'm going to take the stairs a little bit over. Because with all the buildings, you really have a lot of resources to spare tearing down the building and then redoing it if you had an extension, which can stop them or whatever. So I'm just going to put this bit just stupid here. For the little entrance that's happening here. this will go into the rest of the tower. It's going to have some big old blocks around the bottom. No, I'm not doing it like that. It's taking shape. It definitely is. Well, that's assisted, so I can do myself a guide from that, which is good. Oh, I just turn this off. Perfect. I'm just going to put some upwards lines. I already have lines that I'm going to do them other places. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have big stone blocks. The base of the television cube. And this vertical stone will fit into that. I'll fix the stone perspective. I'm not great at the things that happen on curves, so I might look at some references, like draw on an actual bottle and just look at it and see what the lines look like from an isometric perspective. But we'll see. Just a sharp bottle. Oh, Brian, your curve is off. You've got to set the curve that's like that. No. That doesn't no. See, this is why I like to drop off lots and lots of layers. Right, in fact, let's think of it in terms of like the layers that you'd be having with the original draft. So like that's the curve of the tower. Ish. Curve of the tower again. Curve of the tower again. Actually, I have the circle. What am I doing? Oh, I deleted it because I'm a fool. Well, no. this time I might have the basement. So we want to show the foundation being like covered up. And go underneath, like this kind of like maybe rusty bit. Or this sort of like tilled earth with like lovely flowers in. Different kinds of herbs and maybe like fences, runner beans and stuff like that. Okay. That's how I'm coming in. It's looking like it's coming together. It doesn't do bricks. It's an easy way to do bricks. I feel like getting the texture, like a guide, and then I can draw over it and do a detail and make fun of it. It'll look great. I mean, maybe I just do. Oh, I need a curve. Okay, right. What I 2D grid. Cool. Excuse me. And then I just do a real quick sheet. Cool. Let me just fill the gaps. Awesome. I can do that low, and I can turn back my layers. First of all, I duplicate this and then turn it off and hide it somewhere so I can use it again. But we have got these bigger bricks. I could go to this. Too much information. Let's see if I can warp this to fit the this down here. What does that do? Neato. Not what I asked, but oh. Interesting. Right. Right, does that look trash? Or looks pretty decent. Pretty decent. It's not perfect, but it'll do. We'll just move, and if I duplicate it, put it on top of itself. Yeah, like there-ish. Where's the point where it tiles nicely? Okay, like there. This is cheating. And ultimately, there is no cheating or not, there's just getting the job done. And I'm trying to live by that lesson, while also making a real mess of this world. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks tough. That looks good. Ish. Cool. It doesn't fit there. Because it affects me. Well, that's what I can do. I can fix it with a new... Because it's just a guide for me to get it right, you know, the next time. I'm drawing it for real. Let's let it look. Is it being so much? Just make this frozen again. You know, I mean, what work to make all this happens, and you might just at some point you should be like, nah, I just got the effort in. avoiding, but ultimately you have to do. Never do more overwhelming for the top anymore. The top is for the bottom. Okay, stop again. It's not working out. What I'm going to do is, off the stream, I will get a bottle, get a clear plastic cylinder, draw this brick texture, take a photo of it, nice and metric perspective, and then trace it. Because now I can take this. Go like this. So the perfect world, it would just go something like, I could just go doop, 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 doop. And then be like, oh, I'm so smart. There is no grip texture for me to follow. Well, I would if I can actually use this program. Like so. But unfortunately I'm dumb, so yeah. Go figure. Oh, I guess in perspective. Why doesn't it look right? The doors look like it's not right place. You've felt like that before. So 1, 2, 3. Because it's right place, is it? Used to be a little bit over. Okay, that feels better. And then we're going to have hang on, I'm being done. I don't know my symmetric on because I'm a fool. I hope things make sense. As long as the door's arch is not, it doesn't look right. Maybe like a floral, like a oh, they could have like panel bricks. Maybe like found it in something, the notch, and then have a large glass window. Perspective, right? I mean, we have lines, but I can't stick to it. Yeah. Then have like there needs to be like a support here, more likely here to keep the roof going out. So, yeah. Well, it's 2 o'clock. I think I'll leave it there. This stage is all about figuring out the details, which is why it goes a little bit slower. But it's nice to figure out that staircase, to have, and this staircase here as well. I'm going to do that bubble trick, maybe put some pictures of that on Instagram. Things like the greenhouse over here will be quite quick to do, and once I figure out this sort of like perspective, I can just do the exact same over here, except get older. But yeah, I'm just going to keep scrolling like that today. I think we're going to have some lunch though. So thanks for coming along and watching with me. And I will catch you guys, I think, next Wednesday. Atlanta will be drawing with me for working behind me. I'm going to be talking to some other artists about what I can get them into. I'm not going to be streaming working on time next Saturday, because instead I'm going to be doing some live games for the Chimera Literary Festival. So join me and some fantastic authors at 1 to 3 or 4 to 6 for some cool games, showing off some really new exciting adventures on design character sheets and Roll20 that anyone can use, as well as a little bit of more bearings to add into the play mix. So I will see you guys then, and for now, this is just Ryan. Oh, hi James. Yeah, I totally fell asleep in the middle of the sun too. It is gorgeous out there. I'm not sunburned, but I have already got on like a yellowy colour. I tan very easily and burn very easily, so there's definitely going to be some lavender oil on there today. Don't get your sunscreen. Anyway, have a great day, guys. I